Particular whip that I'm going to be showing you how to make is a 3-foot signal whip. For the belly plait, we need to cut 4 cords. The first 2 cords are going to be 9 feet long. And in this particular case, they're both going to be black. Color doesn't really matter, it's completely up to you or the person you're making the whip for. The belly plait, the only part of it that will ever be seen is the hanging loop. So the colors really don't matter a great deal. This particular whip is going to be black and white. So we also need to cut 2 white cords, one of 7-foot length and one of 5-foot length. Okay, and there are our cords, they're all cut. The black cord that I use doesn't have a core material, so we don't have to do anything else to that. The white cord here, on the other hand, has a core in it that has to be removed. So we'll just take this core out. Of the 2 white cords. Okay, that's all finished, and next we'll move into our area where we do our braiding, and we'll show you how to get this set up. Okay, here we are in our braiding area, where we need to find the center of all of the cords. Let's pull all these out and center each set of cords. Okay, we have all our cords centered now. I like to start with the shortest one in the middle, so we'll put the shortest one there and work out to the longer 2. Okay. from the center. You need to come out about 3.5 to 4 inches. And we're going to tie a half hitch here to hold everything in place. Now the center is here and our half hitch is here. I'm going to go on the shorter side of the strands. Put a slip knot in it and hang it over the hook. Usually put a stop knot in case it wants to slip off later. And we have our strands here ready to be braided. We're braiding back towards the center. This is going to form our hanging loop. I'm going to assume that you know how to do a 4-strand round braid. Not really go into too much detail on how to do that. I would need an assistant to handle the camera for that so we could have some close-up shots of how the movements are done. It's relatively simple once you learn it. You're going to want to braid this back until you have 6 inches of braid. Now notice I have all kinds of marks over here on the board to give me measurements. It's very helpful. I'll take a picture of my board and add it to this tutorial so you can see the markings that are on it. It's about 6 inches there, so then we have another half hitch here to keep the braid from coming unbraided. You have a 6-inch braid in the center of the material you're going to be braiding with a half hitch on each end of it to hold it in place. You want to put that over the hook, centered. And like I said, I like to start with the 2 shortest pieces, so I have them in the middle. And next we insert the core. You take the rope core that you made up earlier, and I'm sure it's a personal preference thing, but I like to have the loose cord in front facing me as I'm braiding. And we hold this up here and we take the 2 shorter pieces and cross them with the right one going over the top of the left one. And this is a little bit, you'll notice we have the core a little bit above where they're actually crossing. And then we start doing the 4-strand round braid around the core. Making it as tight as we can. and as even as we can. Now we're going to take this down until all of the laces have been braided around the whip at least once. Before we make any further adjustments. Okay, now we can adjust the end up here so that it comes down to be right between the two half-hitch nuts. It makes for an easier piece in the end. And we continue braiding. And we'll continue doing exactly the same thing till we get down to the point where we want to trim off the loose piece to 6 inches. Okay, we're at about 5 inches now, so we're going to tie these off in a little slip knot so they don't unravel. Your handy dandy shears here. And you want to trim the rope at pretty much exactly 6 inches. Throw away the excess. And continue braiding until we're down to about 9 inches. You may notice we've changed colors. We're working on a different whip now, but we're at the same point where we left off with on the other one. We're right at 9 inches. Actually, we're at the next step, not the same place. The 2 shortest cords should be roughly 1 foot long, and they should be the next laces to braid. These 2 laces get braided exactly the same way that we've been braiding, under 2 over 2. But now we're going to switch to a 6-strand braid rather than an 8-strand braid. The next 2 laces go under 2 over 2. The next laces are where the change occurs. You'll want to go under the 2 longer strands and over, well actually it's still over 2. Okay, this is the side where it changes. You want to go under the 1st and 3rd strands. The shorter strand we're going to go over the top of because we're dropping it into the middle of the braid. So it's going to be going away. And then on the other side this will repeat. You go under, over, under, over. Going over the short strand. Now the 2 shorter strands that we've dropped in the middle we just let hang. We don't hold them anymore. And we go straight into a under 2 over 1 braid. And we're going to do this braid for 2 or 3 revolutions here to lock the pieces that we've dropped in place. At this point you might want to check and make sure they're even up here. If they're not, you can pull on the drop laces just a little to tighten them in. Now we're going to cut the 2 laces we've dropped. We're going to cut them about an inch apart so that they don't both end at exactly the same place. And then we're going to continue our under 2 over 1 braid until it's time to make the next 2 cord drop, which will be in about 9 inches. Okay, this is the point where we're going to drop the 2 remaining shorter cords, the 2 white ones. At this point we're going to go straight into a 4-strand round braid with using the 4 gold strands. We'll go down a few turns to lock the white strands in place, and then we'll trim the white strands off so they're not in the way anymore. The first white strand you want to trim it about an inch before the end of the next taper cord, and the last white one halfway between the remaining 2 taper cords. And now we'll just continue with the 4-strand braid out to 24 inches, which will be the end of the first, or the belly plait. Check our measurement. Right at 24 inches, so we'll tie a 1/2 inch here. And you don't want to tie this 1/2 inch very tight because you are going to have to untie it again later. You just want it on there just so that it holds the braid together to keep from falling apart. Notice, just like on the other whip, you've got some little pieces sticking out in between. You just take some scissors, sharp knife, whatever, trim them off as best you can. And to eliminate the little fuzzy pieces that are still going to be there, you just run a flame on them briefly. You don't want to burn the cord, you just want to melt the little fuzzy parts. And then you roll the core out. Okay, now that we have our belly plaiting done, what we need to do is roll the whips out. This needs to be done on a hard, smooth surface. I use a block of wood to roll mine. You can use just about anything as long as you can get a good heavy roll on it. And you just roll back and forth. This helps to smooth out any lumps and bumps that may be in the whip. Make it a much nicer whip when it's finished. You want to go over it several times. Probably have to start pressing pretty lightly because parts of the whip are going to be less round than other parts. And each time you want to roll with a little more pressure, a little more downward force. Make it nice and smooth. Some cords are much stiffer than other cords, you might notice. They're a little bit more difficult to roll and get smooth. But again, you start out lightly and press a little harder each time you go across it, and it will smooth out. Now we need to cut these cords, whip cords, to the right length, which in the case of the 3-foot whip is 30 inches. So we need to come all the way down here to the end and cut them to 30 inches each. Go ahead and trim them both at the same time. And the next thing we need to do is cut these back to a taper. To do that, we have to untie this knot. And before we do that, we'll want to take a little piece of our handy dandy electrical tape and put it around the whip so that it doesn't come unbraided. And we'll put the tape on the whip right behind the knot. And then we can safely untie the 1/2-inch knots and trim the whips down so that they have a taper. I'm going to go back about 1.5 inches for each step down. So the first one we're going to go back 1.5 inches. Second one we go back to 3 inches. And the third one we go back to 4.5 inches. This gives us a nice taper for the overlay to attach to. And we'll do the same with the other whip. And they're all set to have the overlay applied. Next step is to cut the cords for the overlay plat. Okay, we're now ready to start the overlay plat. This is where I do things quite a bit differently from every other whip maker that I know. We're going to start with the two 14-foot cords doubled over the plaiting loop here in the center of the cords. And pull the cords off, making sure we keep the center. Put one cord back over the loop. The other cord you wrap around the two that are hanging on the hook, and you pull them up to where the 0 mark is on the plaiting board, or just above. Cross the left strand under the right strand, and then you just start a simple 4-strand round braid. You have to be kind of careful when you first start that you don't pull things too hard and pull this part down below the 0 mark on the plaiting board. Once you've done a couple of revolutions there, you can pull as hard as you want. You're not going to move anything. We want to plait this down to the first mark on the plaiting board, which is 4 inches. And this is just a simple 4-strand round braid for 4 inches. Okay, we're at the 4-inch mark now. We're going to add our first cord in. We take the first 6-foot cord and we put it behind our braiding so that it lies along the braiding. Leave a couple inches out, running up the part that you've already braided. And you just keep doing the 4-strand round braid right over the top of it. You're going to do 2 revolutions. Now you're going to turn the braid around, grab the part that you've braided into the center, and pull it down till the end is inside the braiding. Be very careful here because it can be hard to pull and then suddenly get real easy and you can pull it all the way out. You don't want to do that. Then you have to start over. And pull it to just inside of the braid, and the end of it can't be seen anymore. At this point we add the second 6-foot strand in exactly the same way. We lay it behind everything else with a couple of inches running up the back of the braid, and we continue with a 4-strand round braid right over the top of it, and we now have the 2 cords in the middle. We'll do 2 revolutions around the cord we just added. Turn the plait over, take a hold of the part we just added and pull it down inside of the braid until we can't see it, just the tip of it there. Now we have about a 1/2 inch to go before we get to the 6-inch mark, and that's where we'll add the core and the belly of the whip into this braid. I'm going to do 1 revolution here. Kind of locks everything in place. And the 2 cords we dropped into the center, we're going to pull out 1 to each hand now. And here we're going to do under 1 over 2. You have to be careful to keep the cords that you added in the place where they belong. In the order of the braiding. We did 2 revolutions, and the 2 pieces or laces that we added in should be the top 2 pieces now. We're at 6 inches and it's time to add the belly and core of the whip into this part of the overlay. Okay, now we're ready to add the core of the whip into the center of the overlay plait. And we do this the same way that we added the extra cords in, by placing the tip along the back of the braid and braiding over the top of it. We're doing a under 1 over 2 3-strand round braid at this point. Which we will continue to do for a short distance here. Just like with the other additions, we've done 2 revolutions, and now we want to flip the braid around and pull the tip of the core inside the plait so that we don't see it anymore. And we continue braiding our under 1 over 2 3-strand round braid. We're going to continue this until we have 10 inches braided. That's the next mark on the board. At that point we'll be ready to add the next cord in. We're now at the 10-inch point, and we're ready to add in the next cord. These will be the 5-foot cords. All the cords are added in the same way. You lay them on the back of the braid and start braiding around them. This is as if they were a part of the core. And you braid for 2 revolutions. And you turn the braid over and you pull the cord into the braid until you can't see the tip any longer. Now we add the next 5-foot cord in. And at this point we're still doing an under 2 over 1 round braid. Do a couple of revolutions here and we'll pull the last cord that we added into the plait. Go. And we'll do some more revolutions here to make sure that it's locked in place and doesn't pull out when we start braiding with it. Well, we're at 12 inches now, which is where we want to start bringing this braid in. At this point we want to take the new cord on the left side, cross it in front of the braid, and the cord on the right side and cross it to the left so that they cross right over left. And we continue doing an under 2, now over 2 braid. And we will continue this braid till we get to the next point on the board, which is 16 inches. We're now at 16 inches and it's time to add the 2 4-foot cords in. So at this point we'll make another addition just like the ones we made before. Put the new lace in behind everything else. And continue right along with your under 2 over 2 8 plait braid. 2 revolutions, and then pull the new lace into the core just until you can't see the tip of the lace anymore. Then we add the second 4-foot cord in, exactly the same way. Braid 2 revolutions after we've added it in. Turn your braid over and pull that cord into the center as well so that you can no longer see the tip. And we're going to now braid about 4 revolutions, 4 or 5, to lock those 2 laces into the braid. It's handy when you do a 2-color whip, because you can see exactly where things need to be done when you're adding the new laces into the braid. We'll want to add them in just after we braid the other 2 cords that are the same color as the ones that have been added in. In other words, on the next revolution. Now here we'll take the lace that we've added in that's on the left side and cross it over the core and under the lace that's on the right side. And take the right side lace and cross it over the top of that lace to the other side. We'll continue with this braid, which is under 2 over 3 now, until we get to 22 inches, which is the point where we add the next 2 laces in. We're now at the 22-inch mark, which is where we add the last 2 cords in, the 3-foot cords. And again, they're added in the same as all the others. You place them behind the core, braid over the top of them. Do 2 revolutions over this first one. Flip the braid around. pull it into the center until the tip is hidden. We add the last cord in. Braid 2 revolutions to lock it in place. Turn our braid over and pull it into the center. And we'll braid over these several times using an under 3 over 2 braid. Since we're doing a 2-color whip, what we'll actually do is braid until the next point where the white laces are at the bottom. And then we'll add those 2 laces that we just added to the core into the braid in the front. At this point, we'll take the lace that we added that's on the left side of the core, cross it over to the right side, and the lace we added to the right side of the core, and cross it over to the left side, going over the top of the first lace. And we go straight into a under 3 over 3 round braid at this point, and we will continue with an under 3 over 3 round braid to the end of the whip. Now we've braided down to the base of the whip. You want to continue braiding until the back side of the braid, the short side, comes out to just past where the Turk's head knots are right here. At that point you will be finished with this part of making the whip. And yes, your braid will continue up over the hanging loop for a short way. Okay, we're past though, almost past the half inch. One more time around should do it. it did. At this point, we will tie a half hitch here to secure the braid so that it doesn't come unraveled. And we're done with the braiding portion of the whip. Now we've braided down to the base of the whip. You want to continue braiding until the back side of the braid, the short side, comes out to just past where the Turk's head knots are right here. At that point you will be finished with this part of making the whip. And yes, your braid will continue up over the hanging loop for a short way. Okay, we're past though, almost past the half hitch. One more time around should do it. And it did. At this point, we will tie a half hitch here to secure the braid so that it doesn't come unraveled. And we're done with the braiding portion of the whip. People have asked me several times how I make my crackers. What I make my crackers of is an 80-pound fishing line. It's a microfilament line. It's called Power Pro. Most sporting goods stores carry this or something similar. I need an 11-foot piece of line, which I will double over the hook. Twice. And at this point we use any object that we can wrap the cord around to spin the cord. I'm going to spin it kind of like winding up the old rubber band powered airplanes. Need to keep tension on it and spin it until it's decreased in length, about 6 inches. Once you've got the right amount on it, it's really kind of a personal preference thing. You can remove the object you used to spin it with and spin it just a little bit with your fingertips. Now you want to go back to the halfway point. You want to double it once again, holding the center point and the ends, and then release the center point and it will spin up on its own. So that you end up with this. At this point, you want to actually unwind 2 or 3 inches. Get a single strand. There we go. And make a loop in the strand, like so, and then go under and around the cracker through the loop twice. And then pull it tight. I've heard this described as a fisherman's knot, a surgeon's knot, and a blood knot. Which it is, I don't know, but it's what I use to make my crackers with. And the only thing left to do to this cracker for it to be ready is to trim it off at the point of the shortest single piece with your scissors and put it on the whip. Okay, now we're going to put our cracker on the end of our whip simply by inserting the tip of the whip into the loop of the cracker, like so, and then threading the tip of the cracker back through the loop in the end of the whip. Voila. Easily replaceable cracker that will not come off. One thing we need to do to the whip before we're ready to roll it out is we need to secure the Turk's head knot that we tied right here so that it doesn't come loose while we're rolling the whip out. Do this with a little tack. Now, just like we did with the belly of the whip, we have to roll out the core of the whip to make it nice and smooth. Start at the small end, holding your cracker, and roll it away. Again, you want to start out relatively lightly, and each time you roll from one end of the whip to the other, you want to go press down a little bit harder. This will help your whip to be nice and smooth and round, just like it's supposed to be. Nice and smooth. This is also a good time to check the length of your whip to make sure you don't have any little fuzzy pieces. There are a couple here, and we'll just get a pair of scissors and trim those off and then pass a flame over them to seal them into the whip. Okay, now we have the base of our whip where we're going to be putting a Turk's head knot. You will need 5½ or 6 inches of 1-inch nylon webbing. You want to wrap it around the base of the whip 2 complete turns. And again, we will be securing this with the little tacks or nails so that it stays in place. I'm going to pull this all the way around one time and then lay the loose laces back across it like so, and take it around the next time, going over the top of the laces. This will help to hold the whip in place, or the Turk's head knot in place, once the whip is finished and being used. We'll put this on as tight as we can. Pull the laces down to get them snug. And again, we're going to secure this in place with the little tacks. And it's usually a good idea to angle the tacks a little bit towards the butt of the whip. Makes it a lot less likely for this thing to come off later. And we'll put 2 tacks here at the end of the webbing. Go to the opposite side of the webbing and make sure everything is lined up. And place a tack there. And then 1 on each side, 90 degrees around. You get a little loose edge here. It's always a good idea to heat seal the end of the nylon webbing. Next, we trim off the excess laces that are sticking through here. We want to trim them as close to the webbing as possible, but be careful not to cut the webbing. And just work your way around the whip till you get back to where you started from, and you're done. And we can move on to the next step, which will be applying the Turk's head lacing over the top of this foundation. Alright, there we are, all ready for the Turk's head knot. Okay, it's not quite ready for the Turk's head knot. Forgetting a step here. I'm going to again take my handy dandy electrical tape and wrap it around and completely cover the nylon webbing here that we're using for our base. It makes it much easier to form the Turk's head knot. And it also helps the base to hold a better shape. And we'll just wrap that around until it's completely covered. And we're going to take our little block of wood and roll this a little bit to make sure it's relatively as round as it can be. Now we're ready for our Turk's head knot lacing to go over the top of this base.